The hot air on Xerion Prime carried the smell of fear and broken dreams. Thousands of creatures from across the galaxy were packed into metal cages like animals waiting to be sold. The slave market stretched for miles, filled with the worst kind of people, those who bought and sold lives for money. Nahayun stood behind rusted bars, her once beautiful blue skin now dirty and pale. The Etherian woman had skin that used to glow like starlight, but weeks of being trapped had made it dull and lifeless. Her hair, which should have sparkled like crystal, hung around her face in messy, unwashed tangles. Dark circles surrounded. Her large eyes and her thin body showed she had not eaten much in days. All around her, buyers walked between the cages like they were shopping for furniture. They poked and prodded the prisoners, checking their teeth, muscles, and health. Some laughed while discussing prices. Others argued with sellers about which species would work best in their mines or factories. The sound of chains rattling mixed with cries of pain and hopelessness. Hayun remembered the day her life fell apart. Her parents had always loved gambling, more than they loved her. They spent every credit they had on risky bets and dangerous games. When their debts grew too big to pay, loan sharks came to their home. Instead of facing their problems, her mother and father made a choice that broke her heart forever. They sold their own daughter to pay what they owed. "Please, there must be another way," Hayun had begged, as strange men put chains on her wrists. Her parents would not even look at her. Her father counted the money while her mother turned away and cried fake tears. "You will understand when you are older," her mother had whispered. But Hayun understood perfectly. She meant nothing to them compared to their selfish desires. The slave traders were not kind. They put her on a ship with dozens of other stolen people. The journey to Xerion Prime took weeks. They gave little food and water. Many prisoners got sick, some died. Hayun learned to stay quiet and invisible, hoping to avoid the guards' attention. Now she stood in this horrible place, watching as families were torn apart and sold to different buyers. A mother screamed as someone bought her children, but not her. An old man begged anyone who would listen to buy him and his sick wife together, but the buyers only cared about getting the best workers for the lowest prices. A fat Vrex trader with yellow eyes and sharp teeth approached her cage. His thick fingers reached through the bars and grabbed her face roughly. "Open your mouth, female," he ordered in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Hayun tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. He forced her mouth open and checked. Her teeth like she was an animal he might buy for his farm. Good teeth, strong jaw. "This one will last long in the crystal mines," he told his assistant, who wrote notes on a digital pad. The trader's breath smelled terrible, and his hands left dirty marks on her skin. Other buyers gathered around discussing her like she could not hear them. "How much for the Etherian?" asked a woman with scars covering half her face. "She is young and healthy, perfect for entertainment or hard labor," the seller replied, smiling, in a way that made Hayun feel sick. As more buyers crowded around her cage, touching her and talking about what they would make her do, Hayun closed her eyes tight. She thought about the stories her grandmother used to tell her about brave heroes who saved people in trouble, but no heroes were coming for her. In this dark place, surrounded by evil people who saw her as nothing more than property to be bought and sold, she wished for the pain to end. Death seemed kinder than whatever terrible life waited for her. Captain Kang Jiho walked through the crowded marketplace with only one thing on his mind: finding cheap parts to fix his broken ship. The tall human had deep scars running down his left cheek from an old battle, and his dark eyes showed the tiredness of someone who had seen too much war. People moved out of his way as he passed, recognizing the uniform of a mercenary captain. His reputation was well known across this part of the galaxy. Jiho fought for whoever paid him the most credits. Nothing more. His ship, the Steel Phoenix, needed new engine coils and navigation sensors. The parts dealers in the main market charged too much, so he had come to the darker sections of Xerion Prime where prices were lower. He did not like this place, but business was business. Wars did not pay for themselves, and his crew needed to eat. Jiho had been checking prices at different stalls when he heard the commotion near the slave cages. He tried to ignore it at first. Slavery was legal here, and it was not his problem. But the sound of someone crying made him look anyway. That was when he saw her. The blue-skinned woman was pressed against the back of her cage, while three buyers, argued over her. One of them, a huge Vrex with yellow teeth, kept reaching through the bars to grab at her. Each time she tried to move away, he laughed and grabbed harder. The other buyers were making comments about what they would do with her that made Jiho's stomach turn. "Stop looking and keep walking," he told himself. "This is not your fight." But something about the fear in her eyes reminded him of his own sister, who had died years ago when pirates attacked their home planet. He had been too young and weak to save her then. The memory hit him like a punch to the chest, and before he knew what he was doing, his feet were carrying him toward the slave market. The seller, a greasy human with gold teeth, smiled when he saw Jiho approaching. "Ah, Captain, looking for some company for your long space travels? This Etherian is top quality, young, healthy, and very obedient." Jiho looked at the woman in the cage. She had stopped crying and was staring at him with a mix of hope and terror. Her blue skin was covered in bruises, and her beautiful crystal hair was dirty and tangled, but her eyes still held a spark that had not been broken. "How much?" Jiho heard himself ask. The seller's smile grew wider. "For you, Captain, a special price. 50,000 credits. 50,000 credits. That was everything Jiho had saved, plus money he had borrowed from his crew. It was supposed to pay for ship repairs and supplies for the next 6 months. His practical mind screamed that this was stupid and dangerous. "Deal," he said anyway. His crew members, who had been shopping for supplies nearby, rushed over when they heard what was happening. "Captain, are you crazy?" shouted his pilot, a small blue alien named Kix. "We need that money for the ship." But Jiho was already transferring the credits to the seller's account. The cage door opened with a rusty squeak, and the woman stepped out slowly, like she could not believe it was real. Back on his ship, Jiho led her to his private quarters where no one could bother them. She stood in the corner, shaking, waiting for him to tell her what he wanted from her. Instead, he pulled out a tool and carefully cut the metal chains from her wrists and ankles. "You are free," he said quietly, dropping the broken chains on the floor. She stared at him like he had spoken in a language she did not understand. "Free?" she whispered. "Yes, free. You can leave whenever we reach the next planet, or you can stay if you want. Your choice." Heiyun could not process what was happening. In all the stories she had heard about humans, they were described as fierce, warriors who conquered planets and built empires. They were not known for kindness or mercy. So why had this scarred captain spent a fortune to buy her freedom? What did he really want? The first few days on the Steel Phoenix felt like a strange dream to Heiyun. She kept waiting for Captain Jiho to demand something from her, but he never did. He gave her clean clothes, her own small room, and told the crew to leave her alone while she recovered. The ship's doctor, a kind old woman named Dr. Yoon, treated her bruises and made sure she ate regular meals. Slowly, Heiyun began to explore the ship and meet the crew. What she found surprised her completely. These people were not the cold, heartless warriors she had expected. Instead, they were like her, broken people who had found a new family among the stars. There was Kix, the blue-skinned pilot who had been thrown out of his home planet for being different. He spoke with a stutter, but could fly the ship through asteroid fields like it was a dance. The weapons officer, a tall woman named Park Minji, had lost her entire family to slave raiders and now fought to protect others. Even the ship's cook, an old man called Uncle Han, had been rescued from a prison planet where he was sent for stealing food to feed hungry children. "The captain has a habit of picking up strays," Dr. Yoon explained while checking Heiyun's healing wounds. Everyone on this ship was saved by him at some point. He sees something in people that they cannot see in themselves. Heiyun watched Captain Jiho carefully during those first days. He was quiet and serious most of the time, but she noticed small things. When young Kix made a mistake during flight practice, Jiho patiently showed him the right way instead of yelling. When Uncle Han burned dinner, the captain just smiled and helped clean up the mess. And every evening he walked through the ship checking on each crew member, like a father making sure his children were safe. The test of who Jiho really was came. On their 4th day out from Zerion Prime, they were traveling through a peaceful trade route when the ship's sensors picked up a distress signal. A group of family transport ships was under attack by Crimson Blade pirates. the worst kind of criminals who killed for fun. "Captain, we should stay out of this," advised the navigation officer. "Those pirates have 3 heavy cruisers. We only have 1 ship." Heun was on the bridge, watching and learning how the ship operated. She saw Jiho's jaw tighten as he looked at the tactical display showing the innocent families being attacked. The pirates were destroying ships one by one, not even bothering to ask for surrender. "No," Jiho said firmly. "We do not abandon innocent people. All hands to battle stations." The crew moved quickly to prepare for fight, but Heon could see the worry on their faces. The Steel Phoenix was fast and well armed, but fighting 3 larger ships seemed impossible. As they flew toward the battle, she watched the tactical screen showing the enemy positions. Growing up on her home planet, Heon had studied military history and strategy as part of her education. Her people, the Etherians, were known for their analytical minds and ability to see patterns others missed. As she stared at the way the pirate ships were arranged, something clicked in her brain. "Excuse me," she said quietly to the tactical officer, a serious man named Lieutenant Kim. "I think I see something." Kim barely looked at her. "Not now, we are about to enter combat." But Heon had noticed that the 3 pirate ships were positioned in a triangle formation, with their strongest ship in the front. They were confident and not watching their rear carefully. If the Steel Phoenix could get behind them and target the lead ship's engines, it would create confusion and give the family ships time to escape. "The lead ship's rear shields are down," she insisted, pointing at the display. "If you hit their engines now, the other 2 ships will break formation to help." Lieutenant Kim finally looked at what she was pointing at. His eyes widened as he realized she was right. "Captain!" he called out. "The Etherian woman has spotted something important." Jiho listened to Hyun's observation and immediately ordered the attack she suggested. The Steel Phoenix swooped behind the enemy formation and fired everything they had at the lead ship's engines. The massive pirate cruiser exploded in a ball of fire, and just as Heon predicted, the other 2 ships panicked and broke their attack formation. With the pirates confused and disorganized, the family transport ships escaped to safety. The remaining pirate vessels, realizing they had lost their advantage, retreated into hyperspace rather than face the human ship that had outsmarted them. As the crew celebrated their victory, Hyun felt something she had not experienced in months: respect from others. The tactical officer nodded to her with approval. Other crew members smiled and thanked her for her help. Even Captain Jiho looked at her with new interest. "That was excellent tactical thinking," he told her later. "Where did you learn to read battle formations like that?" For the first time since her rescue, Heon felt useful instead of just grateful. Maybe, just maybe, she had found more than just freedom on this ship. Maybe she had found a place where she truly belonged. 3 weeks after the battle with the pirates, Heon was starting to feel like she truly belonged on the Steel Phoenix. She had been helping Lieutenant Kim with tactical analysis and even started learning basic ship maintenance from the engineering crew. For the first time in her life, she felt valued for her mind rather than just her appearance. That peaceful feeling shattered when Dr. Yoon burst onto the bridge with a worried expression. "Captain, we have a problem. I just intercepted a communication that mentioned Hyun by name." Jiho's face darkened as he listened to the recording. The voice belonged to someone from the Obsidian Syndicate, not just any criminal organization, but the most feared slave trafficking network in the galaxy. They specialized in hunting down rare and exotic species to sell to the highest bidders. "The Etherian female is traveling with a human mercenary ship called the Steel Phoenix," the voice said. "Her parents have paid us extra to bring her back. Alive. They want their property returned." Heon felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Her parents, the same people who had sold her to pay their gambling debts, were now paying criminals to hunt her down. They saw her rescue as theft of their property, not as their daughter finding freedom. "Why would they want me back?" Hyun asked, her voice shaking. "They sold me. They made it clear I meant nothing to them." Lieutenant Kim pulled up information about the Obsidian Syndicate on his computer. "It says here that Etherians who have been trained in tactical analysis are worth 10 times more than regular slaves. Word must have spread about what you did during the pirate battle." The cruel irony hit Heon like a cold wave. Her newfound skills and confidence, the very things that made her feel valuable, had also made her a bigger target. Her parents did not want their daughter back because they loved her. They wanted their investment back because she was now worth more money. "Captain," said Kix from the pilot's seat, "we have 5 ships dropping out of hyperspace. They look like syndicate hunters." Ji-ho moved quickly to the captain's chair. "Battle stations, everyone. Kix, take us toward that dead moon. Maybe we can use its gravity field to our advantage." But the syndicate ships were faster and better equipped than regular pirates. They surrounded the Steel Phoenix near the dead moon, cutting off all escape routes. A voice came over the communication system, smooth and confident. "Captain Ji-ho of the Steel Phoenix, we know you have stolen property belonging to the NR family. Return the Etherian female, and we will let you and your crew live." Haeun stood frozen on the bridge, watching the 5 enemy ships on the tactical display. Each one was bigger than the Steel Phoenix, with more weapons and stronger shields. Fighting them would be suicide for her new family. "I have to go with them," she said quietly. "I will not let you all die because of me." She started walking toward the exit, planning to contact the syndicate ships and surrender herself. But before she could take 3 steps, a strong hand grabbed her arm. Captain Ji-ho pulled her behind the tactical station, just as the enemy ships opened fire. "Over my dead body," Ji-ho snarled as plasma bolts lit up the space around them. The ship shook as their shields absorbed the impact. "You are crew now. We protect our own." Haeun stared at him in shock. She had spent her whole life believing that no one would ever choose to protect her when it meant real danger. Her own parents had abandoned her the moment it became inconvenient to keep her. But here was this scarred human captain, willing to fight impossible odds rather than give her up. "But Captain," she protested, "they will destroy your ship. They will kill everyone." Ji-ho looked at her with eyes that burned with determination. "Then we fight. And if we die as a family defending each other. That is what real families do." Around the bridge, the crew worked frantically to return fire and avoid the enemy attacks. Dr. Yoon had come up from the medical bay with a rifle in her hands. Uncle Han left the kitchen carrying spare ammunition. Even young Kix was flying the ship with a skill that kept them alive against impossible odds. These people, these wonderful, brave people, were choosing to risk everything for her, not because she was valuable property, but because they cared about her as a person. The warmth that spread through Haeun's chest was something she had never felt before. For the first time since childhood, she felt truly wanted. "Tell me what to do, Captain," she said, moving to the tactical station. "Let's show these criminals what happens when they threaten our family." The battle in space was fierce, but the Steel Phoenix managed to damage 2 of the syndicate ships, with clever tactics and teamwork. However, their victory was short-lived. The remaining enemy vessels launched boarding pods that crashed into the ship's hull like metal spears, cutting through the outer armor. "They're coming aboard," shouted Lieutenant Kim as alarms blared throughout the ship. "All crew members, arm yourselves and prepare to repel boarders." Haeun had never held a weapon in her life, but Dr. Yoon quickly showed her how to use a plasma rifle. "Point. Squeeze the trigger gently and try not to hit our own people," the doctor said with a grim smile, before rushing off to set up a medical station. The first Syndicate Marines broke through the airlock doors, wearing heavy black armor, and carrying weapons that looked like they could blow holes through walls. They moved with military precision, using shields and coordinated attacks to push deeper into the ship. Captain Ji-ho appeared beside Haeun, his own rifle ready. "Stay close to me," he ordered. "Watch my movements and do what I do." What happened next amazed everyone who witnessed it. As they moved through the ship's corridors fighting the invaders, Haeun and Ji-ho began working together like they had been partners for years. When Ji-ho ducked behind cover, Haeun was already there waiting. When she pointed out an enemy position, he was ready to attack it before she finished speaking. "Behind the storage containers," Haeun called out, spotting movement in the shadows. Ji-ho immediately turned and fired, hitting a Syndicate Marine who was trying to sneak up on them. "Good eyes," he said, then motioned for her to follow him down a side passage. They fought their way through the ship's main corridor, where Uncle Han and several crew members were trapped behind overturned tables. The Syndicate Marines had them pinned down with heavy fire, and the situation looked hopeless. "We need to get behind them," Jiho whispered to Haeun. "Can you climb through those maintenance shafts?" Haeun nodded, even though she was terrified. Following Jiho's lead, she crawled through the narrow metal passages above the corridor. When they dropped down behind the enemy soldiers, they caught them completely by surprise. The battle was turning in their favor when disaster struck. A Syndicate Marine threw a grenade that bounced off the wall and rolled toward their position. Jiho saw it first and pushed Haeun away, but he was not fast enough to save himself. The explosion threw him against the wall with terrible force. Blood ran down his face, and his left arm hung at a strange angle. He tried to stand but collapsed with a groan of pain. "Captain!" Haeun screamed, but there was no time to panic. 3 Syndicate Marines were advancing on their position, thinking. They had won. Something changed inside Haeun at that moment. All the fear and uncertainty she had carried for weeks disappeared, replaced by a burning anger. These criminals had tried to take her away from the first real family she had ever known. They had hurt the man who had given her freedom and treated her like a daughter. Moving faster than she thought possible, Haeun grabbed Jiho under his good arm and dragged him behind a thick support beam. Then she picked up her rifle and began shooting back at the Marines with a precision that shocked everyone, including herself. Her first shot hit the lead Marine's weapon, destroying it. Her second shot found a weak spot in another Marine's armor. Her third shot forced the remaining attacker to retreat behind cover. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Jiho gasped, looking at her with amazement despite his pain. Haeun kept her eyes on the corridor, watching for more enemies. "You taught me," she said, her voice strong and determined. "You taught me to never give up. You showed me that some things are worth fighting for." The remaining Syndicate Marines, realizing they were facing much stronger resistance than expected, began falling back toward their boarding pods. Within minutes, the invaders had retreated to their ships and jumped into hyperspace, leaving the Steel Phoenix damaged but victorious. As Dr. Yoon worked to treat Jiho's injuries, he looked at Haeun with new respect. She had proven herself not just as a tactical analyst, but as a true warrior who would fight to protect her family. "They will be back," Jiho said quietly as the medical team carried him to the sickbay. "The Syndicate does not give up easily." Haeun helped support his weight as they walked. "Let them come," she replied with confidence she had never felt before. "We will be ready." For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of the future. She had found her strength, her purpose, and, most importantly, her family. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the quiet of the medical bay, Haeun carefully cleaned the cuts on Captain Jiho's face while Dr. Yoon worked on his broken arm. The battle was over, but the smell of smoke and burned metal still filled the air. Most of the crew was busy repairing damage to the ship, leaving just the 3 of them in the small medical room. "You saved my life out there," Jiho said, wincing as the doctor set his arm in a healing cast. "The way you fought, the way you protected the crew, I have never seen anything like it." Haeun dipped a clean cloth in warm water and gently wiped blood from a cut near his eye. "You saved me first," she replied softly. "You gave me a reason to fight." Dr. Yoon finished her work and quietly left them alone, sensing that something important was about to happen. Jiho watched Haeun's careful movements as she continued tending to his smaller wounds. Her hands were steady now, no longer shaking with fear like they had been just weeks ago. "Haeun," he said, his voice serious but warm, "I need to ask you something important." She looked up at him, wondering what could be more serious than the battle they had just survived. "I want to adopt you," Jiho said quietly. "Not as property, not as a rescued slave, but as my daughter, my heir. Someone who will carry on my name and everything I have built." The cloth fell from Haeun's hands as she stared at him in shock. In all her dreams of freedom, she had never imagined this. Adoption meant family, real family. It meant belonging, somewhere forever. Tears began flowing down her cheeks, the first tears of pure joy she had cried since she was a small child. You really want me as your daughter?" she whispered. "I have watched you grow stronger every day since we rescued you, Jiho said, reaching out to wipe away her tears with his good hand. You have the heart of a warrior and the mind of a strategist. But more than that, you have become the daughter I never knew I wanted. Haeun threw her arms around him, careful not to hurt his injured arm. Yes, she sobbed into his shoulder. Yes, I want to be your daughter. I want to be part of this family. The adoption ceremony took place 3 days later, after the ship had been repaired and they had reached a safe planet. Following both human and Etherian traditions, the entire crew gathered in the ship's main cargo bay, which had been decorated with flowers and bright fabrics that Uncle Han had bought at the local market. Dr. Yoon, who had studied law before becoming a doctor, performed the official ceremony. Haeun wore a beautiful white dress that the crew had pooled their money to buy, while Captain Jiho stood proudly beside her in his best uniform. Do you, Kang Jiho, promise to protect, guide, and love Haeun as your own daughter for the rest of your life? Dr. Yoon asked. I do, Jiho replied firmly. And do you, Na Haeun, choose to take the name Kang and accept Jiho as your father, promising to honor the family you are joining? I do, Haeun said, her voice strong and clear. As Dr. Yoon declared them officially father and daughter, the crew cheered and threw flower petals in the air. Kix played traditional music on a small instrument, while Uncle Han served a feast he had been preparing all day. For the first time in her life, Haeun felt completely loved and accepted. The celebration was interrupted by the ship's communication system crackling to life. Steel Phoenix, this is the merchant vessel Silver Wind. We have passengers here demanding to speak with your captain. Jiho's expression darkened as he accepted the transmission. On the main screen appeared 2 faces that made Haeun's blood run cold. Her birth parents, flanked by armed syndicate enforcers. We have come for our daughter, her father said, his voice cold and demanding. Return our property immediately, or face the consequences. But the person who stepped forward to respond was not the broken, frightened girl they had sold months ago. Captain Kang Haeun, newly adopted daughter of the most feared human mercenary in 3 sectors, stood tall and proud in her new uniform. I am nobody's property, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had found her true strength. My name is Kang Haeun, and this is my family. Behind her stood the entire crew of the Steel Phoenix, armed and ready to defend their newest family member. Her father Jiho placed a protective hand on her shoulder, his scarred face showing exactly what would happen to anyone who tried to take his daughter away. The birth parents stared in shock at the confident warrior princess their daughter had become, realizing too late that they had lost her forever. The confrontation took place on the neutral trading station of Haven's Rest, where both sides had agreed to meet. Haeun's birth parents had brought a full squad of Obsidian Syndicate enforcers, confident that their superior numbers would intimidate the Steel Phoenix crew into surrendering their property. Haeun's mother, a thin woman with greedy eyes, stood beside the syndicate leader counting credits in her hand. She belongs to us, she sneered, waving the money like it proved her point. We created her, we own her, and we will take her back. But the person who stepped forward was nothing like the frightened girl they remembered. Captain Kang Haeun wore full combat armor painted in the Steel Phoenix colors, with her adoptive father's family insignia proudly displayed on her chest. Her crystalline hair was braided in the traditional warrior style, and her blue skin seemed to glow with inner strength. Belong to no one, she declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had discovered her true worth. But I choose to stand with those who chose me first. Behind her stood the crew of the Steel Phoenix, each one armed and ready to fight. Captain Jiho moved to stand beside his adopted daughter, his hand resting on his weapon. The message was clear. Anyone who wanted to take Haeun would have to go through all of them. Haeun's birth father, a weak man who had always hidden behind gambling and debts, tried to sound threatening. So you cannot defy us, girl. Blood calls to blood. You are our daughter. Haeun laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You stopped being my parents the day you sold me to pay your gambling debts. Real parents protect their children. They do not sell them like objects. The syndicate leader, a cruel man named Vex, who wore scars like trophies, grew tired of the talking. Enough words. We have a contract to fulfill. Take the girl. What happened next became the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. The battle that erupted in the trading station's central plaza was unlike anything the witnesses had ever seen. Father and daughter fought side by side with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. When Jiho moved left, Haeun was already covering his right flank. When she spotted an enemy sniper, he was ready with covering fire before she even pointed. They communicated without words, their bond stronger than any military training could create. The syndicate enforcers had expected to face a simple mercenary crew and capture a helpless girl. Instead, they found themselves fighting two warriors whose connection made them nearly unstoppable. Haeun's tactical brilliance combined with Jiho's battle experience created strategies that confused and overwhelmed their enemies. Behind the cargo containers, Haeun called out, spotting movement. Jiho was already moving, his rifle finding its target with deadly precision. "High position, your left," he responded. Haeun rolled behind cover and fired upward, hitting a sniper who had been trying to get a clear shot at her father. They moved through the battle like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. The turning point came when Vex himself tried to capture Haeun while she was reloading. He grabbed her from behind, thinking he could use her as a human shield. But Haeun had learned more than just shooting from her new family. She had learned to fight. Using moves that Jiho had taught her during their training sessions, she broke free from Vex's grip and disarmed him in seconds. Before he could recover, both father and daughter had their weapons pointed at his head. "Surrender," Jiho ordered, his voice cold as space. The remaining syndicate enforcers, seeing their leader defeated and half their squad down, threw down their weapons. Haeun's birth parents cowered behind an overturned table, finally understanding that their daughter was gone forever. Station security arrived to arrest the syndicate members while the crew of the Steel Phoenix gathered around their victorious captain and his daughter. Other traders and travelers who had witnessed the battle looked at them with a mixture of awe and respect. "Did you see how they fought together?" someone whispered. "Like they shared the same mind," another replied. Word of the battle spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. The story grew with each telling. The human captain and his adopted Etherian daughter, who had defeated an entire syndicate squad through their unbreakable bond. As they walked back to their ship, Jiho put his arm around Haeun's shoulders. I'm proud of you, daughter." Haeun smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the recent fighting. "I learned from the best, father." Behind them, her birth parents were led away in chains, finally facing consequences for their greed. They had sold their daughter for credits, but she had found something worth far more, a real family that would never abandon her. The story of Captain Jiho and his daughter Haeun spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In cantinas and spaceports, traders whispered about the human who had adopted a slave and turned her into a warrior. In dark alleys where the desperate gathered, people shared tales of hope about the father and daughter who fought for those nobody else cared about. What started as one ship and one rescued girl had grown into something much bigger. 3 years after Haeun's adoption, the Steel Phoenix was no longer alone. A small fleet of ships now followed Captain Jiho, each one crewed by people he and Haeun had saved from slavery, trafficking, or worse fates. The newest addition to their fleet was the New Dawn, a sleek cruiser that Haeun now commanded as Captain Kang Haeun. She had earned her rank through countless battles and successful missions, proving herself as both a tactical genius and a fearless leader. Her crew loved her because she understood their pain. She had been where they were, lost and hopeless, until someone gave her a chance. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from the Kepler system," reported her communications officer, a young man named Lee Do-hyun, who had been rescued from forced labor camps. "Slave markets are holding an auction of children." Haeun's blue skin darkened with anger. Children were always the hardest cases, too young to fight back, too innocent to understand why terrible things happened to them. "Send word to my father's ship. Tell him we have work to do." Within hours, both ships were racing toward the Kepler system. The plan was simple but dangerous. While Jiho's Steel Phoenix created a distraction by attacking the slave market's security forces, Haeun would lead a team to rescue the children and destroy the auction facilities. The mission went perfectly, just like so many others before it. When the smoke cleared, 43 children of various species were safe aboard their ships, while the slave market burned behind them. The traffickers who survived would think twice before setting up business in that system again. Later, as the rescued children ate hot meals in the New Dawn's cafeteria, Hyan walked among them offering comfort and reassurance. Many were too traumatized to speak, but their eyes followed her with hope and curiosity. "Will you really take us somewhere safe?" asked a small girl with purple skin and large, frightened eyes. Heyun knelt down to meet the child at eye level. "Yes, little one. And if you want, we can teach you to make sure no one ever hurts you again." This was how their fleet kept growing. Some of the rescued people chose to leave at safe planets, starting new lives with the credits and resources Ji-ho provided, but many others stayed, wanting to help rescue more victims like themselves. They learned to fight, to fly ships, to heal the wounded, and to give hope to the hopeless. The governments and law enforcement agencies that should have been stopping the slave trade often looked the other way, paid off by criminal organizations or simply too corrupt to care. But Ji-ho and Hyeon filled that gap, bringing justice where there was none. Their reputation spread to the darkest corners of the galaxy. In slave pens and prison ships, victims whispered stories about the human captain who saw potential where others saw only problems. They told tales of his Etherian daughter, who proved that family was not about the blood you were born with, but about the people who chose to love and protect you. Young beings who had given up hope would hear these stories and find the strength to survive one more day. Parents who had lost their children to traffickers would pray to whatever gods they believed in, asking for the Steel Phoenix to find their loved ones. The criminal organizations feared them too. Slave markets hired extra security when intelligence. Reports suggested the Liberation Fleet was in their sector. Trafficking rings moved their operations constantly, knowing that staying in one place too long would bring Ji-ho and Hyeon down on them like a storm. But perhaps the most important impact was not measured in ships destroyed or slaves freed. It was measured in the lives that were transformed. Every person they saved had the potential to save others in turn. Every child they rescued might grow up to become a force for good in the galaxy. Dr. Yoon, now the chief medical officer for the entire fleet, often marveled at what they had accomplished. Who would have thought that one act of kindness in a slave market would grow into all this? Hyeon, standing on the bridge of her ship, watching a group of former slaves practice combat drills, smiled at the memory of that first day. Father always said that everyone deserves a chance to be more than what others expect them to be. We just proved he was right. 10 years had passed since that first desperate day in the slave markets of Zerion Prime. Admiral Kang Hyeon now stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Hope, watching through the massive observation windows. As something beautiful unfolded in the ship's training bay below, a young Zephyrian girl named Eri was learning to fly again. Her delicate wings, which had been cruelly clipped by slavers to prevent escape, were finally strong enough to carry her small body through the air. Each tentative flutter brought squeals of joy from the other rescued children who cheered her on from the safety platforms. Hyeon remembered finding Aeri 6 months ago in a trafficking ship's cargo hold. The little girl had been curled up in a corner, too afraid to speak, her beautiful feathered wings cut so short she could barely move them. Like so many others, she had given up hope of ever being free again. "Look at her go," said a familiar voice behind Hyeon. Captain Kang Ji-ho, now her second-in-command, joined her at the observation window. His hair had turned silver at the temples and new lines marked his weathered face, but his eyes still burned with the same protective fire that had saved Hyeon all those years ago. "She reminds me of someone I used to know," Ji-ho said with a gentle smile, a frightened girl who didn't believe she could ever be strong. Hyeon laughed softly, her blue skin glowing with the warm light that Etherians showed when they felt deep contentment. That frightened girl had a good teacher who showed her that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. Below them, little Eri managed to stay airborne for almost a full minute before landing safely in the arms of her instructor. The other children clapped and cheered, while Eri beamed with pride and joy. It was the first time Hyeon had seen the child truly smile. The Liberation Fleet had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. What started as 2 ships had become a force of over 50 vessels, each one crewed by former slaves, refugees, and others, who had chosen to fight for justice. They had freed thousands of beings from slavery, shut down hundreds of trafficking operations, and given hope to countless families. But the real victory wasn't measured in numbers. It was measured in moments like this, watching a broken child learn to soar again. "I've been thinking about retiring," Jiho said quietly. "You don't need an old soldier like me anymore. You've become everything I hoped you would be, and more." Hayun turned to face her adoptive father, the man who had given her everything that mattered. "The fleet needs its founder. The children we rescue need to hear your story, how one human's kindness changed the galaxy." "My story?" Jiho chuckled. "My story is simple. I saw a girl in chains and couldn't walk away. You're the one who turned that moment into something that matters." They were interrupted by the sound of running feet. Eri burst onto the bridge, her newly healed wings fluttering with excitement. She threw her small arms around Hayun's legs in an enthusiastic hug. "Admiral, did you see me fly? I flew for a whole minute," she exclaimed in her high, sweet voice. Hayun knelt down to meet the child at eye level, just as she had learned to do from watching Jiho all those years ago. "I saw everything, little star. You were magnificent. When I grow up, I want to be just like you," Eri said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "I want to help save other kids like me." Jiho and Hayun exchanged a meaningful look over the child's head. They both knew this conversation by heart. It happened with almost every child they rescued. The cycle of healing and hope continued with each new generation. "Tell me, little one," Hayun said gently, "what do you think makes someone part of a family?" Eri thought seriously for a moment, her young face scrunched up in concentration. "Family is when people choose to love you and protect you, even when it's hard." "That's exactly right," Hayun said, her heart swelling with pride. "And you know what? You're already part of our family." Later that evening, as the 3 generations of the Kang family shared dinner in the Admiral's quarters, Jiho asked the question that had been on his mind all day. "Think she'll carry on the tradition?" he asked, watching Eri carefully feed scraps to the ship's cat. Hayun's skin glowed even brighter as she watched her newest daughter, the latest in a long line of children she and Jiho had adopted over the years. Each one had been broken when they found them, and each one had grown into something beautiful and strong. "She already is, father," Hayun said softly. "She already is." Across the stars, in slave markets and trafficking dens, in refugee camps and prison ships, beings who had lost all hope whispered stories of the liberation fleet. They spoke of the human who proved that one person's compassion could change everything, and the Etherean who showed that family was a choice, not an accident of birth. What had started as a simple act of kindness in a marketplace had grown into a movement that shook the foundations of an unjust galaxy, and it would continue to grow, carried forward by each child who learned to fly again, each slave who discovered their worth, and each person who chose love over profit. The legacy of stars would shine forever,